Good evening and good night, everyone. This is update for April 6th, 2022, day 42, end of the date update. The just quick summary, it's probably the quietest day on the front line so far in this war. So there's very little update, but we'll just discuss some other items that were frequently asked in the comment section under the video. So there was one question. Someone was saying like, "Oh, is there front lines here where we show Ukrainian-Russian border and even border with Belarus?" No, there's no front line here. Ukrainian border guards here on Ukrainian border, and there's no fighting. There's nothing, no shelling. So this area where the Sumy region, this is Sumy region, where it starts, that's where the sort of quiet, peaceful at this point part starts. Like area where the Kharkiv region starts, that's where the front line starts. So that's the current situation in terms of the front line. Then there's just a quick update on this Ukrainian brigades that we still see in this whole area, Chernihiv, Kyiv, and so on. And there was we don't have really logical explanation why some of them, obviously for a reason that they need some refitting and replenishing and rest and so on, but some of them are in okay shape and could be used in Izyum. We don't understand why this is happening, and there was a suggestion by someone, okay, maybe they're just simply lacking fuel. Okay, well, in that case, we just want to say there is tons of fuel in Kyiv. There are like traffic jams there of their just regular civilian cars, people returning to the city en masse, and there's just tons of fuel being consumed. So we would think that if the situation is so dramatic here in Izyum, then obviously the military would get priority and get the fuel, but there is no fuel shortages here in Kyiv. So that doesn't sort of cannot be explained from that perspective. We really don't understand the logic here. Okay, let's just start going through the front lines here. We'll as always start with Kharkiv, just totally positional and even just shelling. There's not even like information about active fighting here in this area. What we see here, let's actually look. There is huge movement of Russian troops through Kupiansk. Kupiansk is actually big juncture, not only just simply roads, but also a railroad juncture. So a lot of Russian troops are being transported from Russia. They're coming from Belgorod region through Kupiansk and obviously going here towards Izyum to continue fighting there. And not surprisingly, actually, so both sides took a pause today, so to organize themselves, because we mentioned yesterday when there were like engagement fighting, this really means that there's total mass on both sides, that nobody knows who's where, and apparently that commanders don't have really good control over their troops and who is where and so on. So that's probably both sides why both sides are taking a pause for the day, so there wasn't active fighting there. This is the latest situation from yesterday, so it hasn't changed. Everything's kind of on pause. Basically, Russian troops expanded quite a bit. At this point, we wouldn't even call it bridgehead. It just the territory south of Izyum, and they so far, there are plenty of Russian troops and more coming. We have not identified what other units are coming there. So we will, in a due time, it will become obvious what it is. We also know for sure there is Ukrainian tank brigade. We believe it's 17th, but we're not 100% certain. So we just want to make sure for everyone, it's 100% that there is a Ukrainian tank brigade, and we would not be surprised that there is actually two, given the amount of Russian troops here. But we don't know which ones. Also, we know that 95th Brigade is suffering heavy losses here. And we know also Russian troops suffering losses there. We see a lot of burnt equipment and so on. So there are heavy losses on both sides going on in this area. So let's actually move to, let's quickly look what's going on here in Severodonetsk. Actually, we kind of skipped it there. Oh, we missed it. So there is ongoing fighting in Severodonetsk, and there was ammonia tank blown up there by the shelling. It's nobody knows at this point who blew it up. It's just war. And so, for those who don't understand, ammonia is very toxic chemical compound when it's concentrated. So that's kind of dangerous stuff going on there. And there are a lot of industrial sites in Severodonetsk, and then here west of actually in Kramatorsk, in that area. So it just could be potentially quite dangerous in general. There is west of Donetsk relatively quiet. Again, let's here south, kind of like Zaporizhia line as well, quiet. Even in actually in Mariupol, we don't hear much of like intense fighting. It really looks like a kind of like on a war in a total pause everywhere. We just want to mention a little bit more about this 501st Battalion, because there are many questions, and some people still doubt, thinking that this was just Russian propaganda show here when they surrendered. We also thought so too initially, because we thought that this is just all Ukrainian prisoners of war assembled from front lines in Donetsk, near Mariupol, from everywhere, from the beginning of the war, and they just paraded. However, what we are learning is that Ukrainian side is aware of this, and they not actively denying it. So in a way, you kind of like, and there are some high-ranking police kind of like officials that kind of like conceding it through the T's. So it does look like that this 501st battalion surrendered. That was between 260 and 270 people. So we don't know why and how. Maybe they didn't have ammunition. They ran out of that. That was probably the most logical explanation. They ran out of ammunition, but this is obviously our speculation. We don't know for sure what's going on there. So from what we know, there is not much. As we said, there is really not much progress here on front lines because it was kind of on total pause. And what we're seeing is that Russian attacking troops, are resorting to just shelling. They're using like really heavy mortars, 240 millimeter mortars, to shell Azov style. And as we discussed before, this is a futile attempt, and it actually makes more rubble and makes it more easier for Ukrainian troops to defend eventually. So that's the situation here. Let's actually now look here what's going on in the Mykolaiv region, Kherson Mykolaiv region. So we tried to update a little bit map. Ukrainian 60th Brigade squeezed a little bit more Russian scouting troops, like another 5-10 kilometers, depending on the location, to the south. And we want to just say a few words about the 60th Brigade. From what we're learning about it, it seems like it's actually newly formed brigade, and it doesn't have, basically it's not top-notch brigade, and not even like kind of like in the middle. It's towards the bottom in terms of quality. They have all kinds of various equipment, so there's not even like standard equipment. It's everything what Ukraine gets from other countries, and it just a bunch of various things. It does seem like that this brigade is not the highest military quality from our initial assessment, basically. And maybe that's why it's being just used to slowly push Russian scouting troops to the south, and they not being used for anything more, because probably the military capabilities of this brigade are limited, in our opinion. In terms of Russian troops, as before, they all concentrated on the bridgehead, We have not heard of any more attack attempts from 59th Brigade to push Russian troops. So that's more or less is kind of like as well stable situation here. So what we would like to explain a little bit more, that most of the Russian troops kind of like creating this bridgehead here that protects the bridges here in Kherson and Novokakhovka. Those are key bridges here in this situation, right? Because they connect them to the rest of the captured territory. Oops, sorry. Um, so that's kind of like they forming bridgehead, and then they kind of like sending out scouting troops out, and they not like large in numbers. It's probably here about 600 to 800 of troops, not really much. The same is kind of here, probably another, like 200-300 soldiers in Sulygivka. So this is all just more like scouting, just to kind of claim the territory for the future. So it's kind of like creating kind of like bridgehead here. So that's just kind of explanation of the whole thing here. There was another question in the comments about the mud preventing fighting, and that there is going to be more mud right now, and so on. So we would like to explain a little bit about the weather that how it was this winter from the beginning of the war. So Ukraine had really early spring that started like early February. So things that were sort of melting, they were melting really actually mid-February, and by the time Russians attacked, most of the stuff kind of like melted away and evaporated. So it wasn't really bad. Like there's not terribly like muddy situation. There is, however, there were quite numerous problems with not just even just wheeled equipment, but with the tracked equipment that got stuck and bogged down in the mud in Ukraine. And part of it is specifically in the northern part of Ukraine, where, let's actually show it here, in this area, in the Sumy and Chernihiv area. And it's because it's very difficult soil there. It's black soil, so you really got stuck in, like, if it's even you have enough rain, it's really hard to go through it. And another problem, actually, we didn't realize it, and we just researched this recently, is that all of the Soviet-made tanks, in a way, are made kind of worse in terms of ability to go through difficult terrain relative to like T-34, which is kind of like was sort of famous standard for Soviet army in terms of it, why that it was able to go through all difficult terrain without problems, and that was significant advantage over, like, let's say, German tanks, right? So Soviet tanks, like post-war, at least from, let's say, T-64 and up, right? So that's what we looked into. So they actually were made with narrower tracks. So the width of the tracks for example, for T-72 is 580 millimeters. And that's a very critical, important metric in assessing ability of the tank to go through terrain. And for example, and then it's also another important metric is the total weight of the tank. So, and the weight of T-72 plus minus, let's say, 45 metric tons. The weight of T-34 was about like 27, 28 metric tons, and the width of the tracks was 550 millimeters. So what that really means is the pressure per square, per square centimeter, millimeter, whatever you want to use, square, even meter, is much lower for T-34, like significant difference, huge difference in favor of T-34. So that's why that tank can drive through the difficult, like muddy terrain without many problems, as opposed to this T-72, T-80, T-90, T-64. They have, you saw like the weight, not quite 2 times more, but almost, like, let's say 1.6, 1.7 times more. and the tracks only wider by 30 millimeters. So that's really bad. And we can even compare we can actually use another comparison for this. There was a German tank called a Panther. That's actually also was like the weight was about 45 tons, and the width of the tracks was 660 millimeters. So they're even worse that Panther, right? This T-64, 72. So they actually there is significant degradation in terms of their ability to go through difficult terrain, and for that reason, we see many bogged Soviet tanks in Sumy region, in Chernihiv region, and so on. But right now, the soil is really drying up, and it will be much easier to kind of like there will be like lot fewer of this kind of problems. So this is just kind of like informational for those who are interested about this. Otherwise, till tomorrow, and thanks for watching. Bye bye.